And generally my behavioral pattern would exhibit me trying to walk my way out of this, talk my way out of this, right? Like my book Dream Seller is titled as such because I sold dreams for a living. That's how I lived. I made you believe the unbelievable in hopes that I was going to do better, be better, or get better. And it always started with just give me $10. And for the first time in my life, right, I recognized the severity of my situation. My words held no more weight. I couldn't even deny that. And I looked at her, and all I said to her was, I said, Mom, do you hate me? And she said, no, sweetheart. I'll never hate you, but I'll no longer love you to death. You have to go. And that, you know, and the worst part about that is that I knew I had created that outcome. Completely self-induced. I had nobody to blame my shit on anymore. And at that point, no matter how much heroin I stuck into my arm, wine I shoved down my throat, this delusional effect was no longer produced, meaning that I could no longer escape the reality that I had created for myself, which is why I continue to get high, right? Prostituting my body, homeless, sleeping in abandoned houses is not even tolerable. But let me shoot some heroin, drink some wine, eat some pills. Not only does it become tolerable, it almost becomes like desirable, right? This perspective change, this delusional narrative that only exists in my mind. But now at the end, I'm a 38-year-old who's literally burnt every bridge known to man. And no matter how much I put into my arm or down my throat, that delusional effect's no longer produced. Now I can't even escape my reality. That moment of clarity is 24/7 when I'm high and when I'm sober. Ugh. And at this point, I'm just like, all I want to do is kill myself on a daily basis. But I'm just terrified to hurt myself in the process. Yeah. So I'm like stuck in this weird purgatory place that I don't see a way out of. I don't. I'm so low. I'm so low that like the curb looks like a skyscraper for real. And then I ended up in that treatment center, and a mentor, a predecessor, and today a very dear friend of mine's video was played. And his name is Chris Herring. And he played for the Denver Nuggets and the Boston Celtics. And he has a story that has depth and weight. And although I didn't believe in me, I believed in his story. And I could relate to what he talked about. And at one point in his story, he was in a rehab, and the counselor called him in and said, "Hey, Mr. Basketball, I want you to do me a favor, and I want you to do your family the biggest favor you'll ever do for them in your life." He said, "What's that?" And he dials the wife's number. He said, "I want you to call your wife, and I want you to tell your wife to tell your kids that their fathers died in an overdose."
Wow.
And I could relate to that because that's the only way that he was capable of stopping the pain that he was causing his family, his addiction. And he was no longer like that. And I swear to God, I was like, if he can do it. I got up out of that room. I hadn't cried for years. I was so dehumanized, right? I was so desensitized and dehumanized that like it was just par for the course. Like, here we go. Yeah. And I literally have forgotten what it felt like to cry. And I got up out of that room, and I'll never forget, I went outside and I cried. And I cried because I believed like that I was worthy and that like I could do it too. And it had been a long time since I had any optimism about any future. I was so defeated. And in seeing and that again is why I've devoted my life to do what he did for me.
What is the first step to getting sober?
For me, it was just admitting defeat. Yeah. It was admitting defeat. But you know what? I didn't even admit defeat. And that's the tricky process of recovery, right? Like when I walked into that facility, despite telling you how bad things were, I knew that like I had said that they were bad a lot of times before.
Yeah.
I knew that. And I would call and I would tell you how bad things were and how sorry I am and how I was never going to return. And I meant what I said. Yeah. But I didn't understand what I suffered with. I wasn't armed with the facts. I never gave addiction the attention or time it deserved to learn about my opponent. Therefore, I was destined to my history continued to repeat and created my future over and over. And I was like, you know what? I don't know if I'm done drinking or drugging. I don't. But what I do know is that my pain is so unbearable, I just wanted to stop. And I went in, and because of the pain is the motivating factor for me that creates change. Unbearable to me, unmanageability to me is like a Monday morning cup of tea. I only change when the pain is unbearable. When my back's against the wall, I have no other way out of the particular situation I created for myself. But I have to act quick because that window of opportunity for change is the same size as a $10 bill. I'll come up on a $10 bill, buy a bag of heroin, put it in my arm, and all of a sudden, whoa. This was just an overreaction at best, fellas. Yeah. Right? You just caught me at a bad time on a bad way and a bad day. Yeah. Tomorrow will be different. And I mean that. I'll pass a polygraph. Tomorrow will be different. Yeah. But unfortunately, I wake up tomorrow to repeat yesterday's actions, and I'm stuck in Groundhog's Day for 10, 20 years. Yeah. So what happened was I started to buy into what they were suggesting, which they'd always been suggesting at every treatment center, but the pain was just so unbearable that I'm like, okay. And I got into it. And what happened was I started to feel a little bit better. And then I started to feel a little bit better. And then I started to like really believe in myself. And then the staying sober long enough, I was created this beautiful life that now today the thought of going back and returning to a drink or a drug is absolutely insane. But that's because I remain proactive in my process and my recovery and my sobriety. And what I know is that today I suffer with a disease called alcoholism, not alcoholism. So I can't stay sober on yesterday's sobriety. My sobriety has a shelf life of 24 hours. So I remain teachable. I remain humble. And the coolest thing about sobriety is the longer I stay sober, the more I know that I have no idea. And that relinquishes me of all control, which is great because addicts and alcoholics love to not have a lot of things to live up to, right? I'm not in control of any of it. My higher power runs the whole deal. Yeah. This thing works when I don't work it. So when I just get out of my way and follow like the suggestions of people that really genuinely believe in me, my life gets good.
What is the 12-step program you're on? Is that like, how does that work?
I go to AA.
Okay.
Yeah. And I always say the God of my understanding brought me to AA. And AA via the 12 steps brought me back to the God of my understanding. Because what happened is through experiencing the 12 steps, I had a spiritual experience. And the definition of a spiritual experience is simply a psychic change. Meaning that I, Brandon Novak, today with coming up on 9 years sober, no longer think how I thought when I was standing in front of my mother's house and she handed me my 8 scarves, 2 jackets, 3 socks, stick of deodorant, needle, spoon, and a restraining order.
That makes sense.
What happened was, as a direct result of the pain, I bought into the concept of what recovering people do, like all of it. And then I started to change. My interests, my behaviors, my surroundings, they started to change. And then what happened was I was no longer interested in doing what they were doing. And I promise you, they would not be interested in doing what I was doing. So although we still loved each other just as much, like, you don't want to come to an AA meeting with me and then go back to my sober living house where I live and then go to Marianne's Diner where I wash dishes Monday through Friday for $6 an hour. Like, you don't, and I didn't want to go with them to the pub and then fly to here. And then, our interests had just changed, but we never had to say like, this isn't going to work. And that was a really beautiful thing.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So how did you go then? You're on the show. I'm going to go back to your story and then get to a little bit of real estate because, I'm a real estate nerd. You were on the show. Did you get booted off the show because of drugs? Did the show just end, or how did that transition happen? And then what came next?
All of the above, right? Like, crazy thing about People of Bam and Jackass is the character that I played was literally a junkie's dream, right? And that's the crazy thing. Addiction and alcoholism is so delusional. It makes us believe the unbelievable. Right, so let me start there, and then I can kind of dive into that a little bit more to allow the viewer to understand the complexity of the situation, the gravity at hand. If you've been diagnosed as an addict or an alcoholic, and you've accepted that diagnosis, this is not debatable. It's an absolute fact. All that means is that I've been diagnosed with a disease, addiction or alcoholism, that if left untreated, it equates to death. That's a fact. You could Google that. You could pull it up. Non-negotiable. Paired with the fact that I have this alcoholic brain that lies to me in my own voice, that makes me believe the unbelievable, right? Paired with the fact that I've now been diagnosed with, as far as I'm aware of, the only fatal disease that lies to me in my own voice, making me believe the unbelievable, telling me I no longer have this disease. Why? Because I've went to treatment. I've completed a 30-day stay. My life's gotten really good really quick. And now I don't accept that diagnosis anymore because I've got the family back. I've got the career back. Maybe things are different. Follow me. Diagnose me with HIV. I'm rushing to the hospital to get medication. I don't want to die. Fatal disease. Diagnose me with cancer. I'm rushing to the hospital to get chemo. I don't want to die. Fatal disease. Diagnose me as an addict or an alcoholic. I now need to have a glass of wine or a bag of heroin to figure out what the fuck is wrong with you for diagnosing me with said disease. Just as fatal as the first two diseases. But it's not like your voice comes in my head and says, Novak, you're not an addict. And I can be like, fuck you, stranger danger. It's my voice in my head that makes me believe the unbelievable, right? And that is like insanity. That's terrifying. So understanding that, now we're going to transition into the question that you asked. The role that I played, the character that I was perceived to be, as being this addict, alcoholic, this Novak guy who doesn't care about much, does whatever he wants, wherever he wants, with whomever he wants. The more outrageous my behaviors are, the more outlandish the antics become, the better the ratings, the more I'm in demand, the more money I make.
Yeah.
So that paired with all these other delusional things, that's like a junkie's dream.
Yeah.
And it was great until it was no longer great. When I then started to not show up for things. I then started to show up and nod out and overdose in the bathroom and have drug dealers showing up, banging on the tour bus doors, saying where's Novak? He owes us money. And now that's not a good look for the work world. Yeah. So eventually everyone felt that it was better for things to go on without me. And that's a common theme in my life. But unfortunately, right, I would tell myself the Jackass world needs me, the Viva La Bam world needs me. It cannot go on without me. I am an asset. The reality is the Viva La Bam world does not need me. It goes on quite fine without me, and I'm a liability. But I'm the last person to realize that because I possess that job that consists of knowing everything. Yeah. So then, fast forward to that 38-year-old guy standing on his mother's porch as she says she'll no longer love me to death anymore. I got there by way of, we were to head out to this tour in Australia, and we were meeting at Bam's house, and I showed up at Bam's house highly, highly, highly intoxicated and under the influence of copious amounts of heroin, cocaine, Xanax, and some wine. And as soon as I walked through the door, he looked at me immediately and he said, "We're not doing this. Don't even think that you're going on this tour." And he had my ticket and he literally ripped it up in front of my face. And he kicked me out of his house right there on the spot.
Wow.
So now, at this point, I'm 38 years old. I have no driver's license. I've literally burnt the last bridge that was providing me any form of resource or resurrection, and I'm just standing in his driveway, and he's instructed everyone to just leave me be. And I literally have, and I'm so I carry my suitcase up to the top of the street. I make a phone call. I stay at this woman's house, and then she gives me money to get a bus back to Baltimore. But that's what I really dive into with the streets of Baltimore. I get into the psychology of knowing that I'm being offered the keys to this kingdom, but it's only a matter of time not before it's ripped out from under my feet, before I literally light a lighter and burn it all. I couldn't control my behaviors, and that really, really, really was a hard pill to swallow. So that's was the kind of end to what could have been a really successful career. What I thought was the end.
Yeah.
Little did I know it was just the beginning.